Hello everyone and welcome back to the Cyclocross Social podcast. It's already the 17th episode, and after yesterday we talked with Brooke Watts about what to expect in the Urban Cross in Kortrijk, which is taking place tomorrow if you listen this on Saturday. Today I'm talking with Issam and Tom about the Worldcup in Tabor.
Good evening.
Hello everybody.
As I said, we will be talking about the first round of the World Cup, which is going to be held on Tabor this Sunday. We all know the parcours in Tabor. It's the traditional parcours that they have there with the finish down there on the road, the uphills there, and of course the famous barriers uphill, which are quite high. So that's probably going to be the deciding point in the parkour, because it usually is. The weather, it doesn't look like that will really affect the race. If you remember back a couple of years, Tabor, it used to be a bit later in the season, somewhere around end December, beginning of January. So that would mean that there was snow there. This year we are in the beginning of December, end of November, so it's going to be cold. The weather forecast is currently 0 degrees at the moment of racing and -2 in the night before, so the parkers will be fast, but there won't be any snow, sadly. But on the other hand, it could cause an interesting race. Which type of riders would you think would benefit from this fast parkours that they will find here in Tabor?
Well, I mean, at the men's race, I would say that it should be somebody that's normally pretty good on a fast parkour, but also is all right as a climber. I don't think it's not that flat in Tabor, to be honest. So technique is also going to play a big factor at this race. Especially if it's going to be faster, you need to take a little bit more risks as well. The downhill is going to be also very fun to watch, I guess. So I think at the men's race, probably, you would be looking maybe even to a Van der Haar, Niederbeat as well, who's very good in, that short sections and that climbing part. Also a guy that takes a lot of risks. But I mean, you could also look into guys like Quinten Hermans, who I think is really looking forward to this race.
Also, Michael van Toornout has often gone well in Tabor, and we've seen obviously the win recently. He's in good form, so I think he'll be one. And we cannot forget Tom Pidcock making his debut this weekend, so I'm sure we'll see him right up there as well.
So judging by what you just said, we're kind of coming back to the names we usually see at the front. I don't think that's wrong, because these guys look to be the best on any type of parcours, and Tom already mentioned it. Pidcock, he's making his start of the season here in Tabor. In yesterday's podcast, we discussed the comeback of Wout van Aert, who is riding Kortrijk and Tabor for quite some time. So if you're interested in that, you should listen to yesterday's podcast. So today we'll be focusing more on Tom Pidcock. Bear in mind that this podcast is recorded before the Urban Cross in Kortrijk, so we don't know what has happened in that cross and how that could potentially affect the race here in Tabor. But I think we should definitely keep an eye out on Pidcock, because he seems like a guy that doesn't need this transition period. You can put him on the mountain bike the Saturday and on the road bike the Sunday, and he performs well on both races. And I think put him here on a cyclocross bike, he will be there in form, runner-up of last year's World Championships. What do you guys expect from him?
I really think we can see him come straight in with a strong performance. Exactly like you've said, he can prove himself in any discipline and so easily can adapt. Although, that being said, he was meant to be starting the race last weekend, the Super Prestige, but he decided to have another weekend off training. So I'm guessing that just means he wasn't quite feeling ready last weekend, and this weekend he's going to be really on top form. But perhaps maybe he was suffering with some illness or fatigue from his busy summer season, let's say, of mountain biking. And yeah, so I think we'll have to see how it goes, but I wouldn't put him past him to be on the podium in his first race of the season.
I think he of course, he had, of course, that news that came out that he was going to sign with Ineos for next season. So he also has a lot of confidence, being the runner-up of the World Championships by the elite. Those things really help in the confidence of him going towards this race. And he of course had a pretty busy summer, I would say, but he's not the type of guy that would need 2 or 3 races to have a transition. Of course, he needs a little bit of time for sure to get in the rhythm of the race, because that's something you cannot simulate. But I don't think he will struggle that much in the first race, and I think that he can even battle for top 5, to be honest.
I tend to agree on that. I think Pidcock is an extremely talented guy. As you said, he had a busy summer. Let's talk briefly about that summer. For the people who don't know, what kind of results did he get this summer? Because he rode the European Championships. He did some things on the mountain bike. What was the highlight of his summer, and what were his other main moments that he got into the spotlight this summer?
Well, I guess the double world title in the mountain bike would be his highlight of the summer. So he came in off the back of quite short road season, having raced the Euros. He really animated the race, but no major result to speak home about. But then he quickly transitioned to the mountain bike, racing the under-23 World Cup mountain bike rounds, and immediately was in a different league to the other riders there, winning multiple rounds of the World Cup mountain biking, and then taking the e-mountain bike World Championship victory. And that, yes, e-bike, controversial, but there were some really strong riders in there as well, racing against the elites. And then on the Sunday, he went on to win the under-23 mountain bike world title. So I think he'd had a pretty successful summer.
Yeah, and I think on the road as well, in the Giro d'Italia on the 23, he really impressed me there with his climbing abilities. He was very strong, won that Giro d'Italia on the 23. And I think also his 2 performances on both the European Championships and the World Championships by the elites, where he showed that he still needs that little bit extra to perform really well at the elite. But still, I think especially the European Championship, he showed that he is able to race with those guys, and add on top of that the mountain bike results. He had a very good summer, I would say, and I think on top of that, of course, that contract he got from Ineos, made that summer a complete summer for him.
Let's then compare him to the other road rider that is making his return this season, this weekend, Wout van Aert. I mean, we all know what he did this summer. We talked about it a long time yesterday, but put him against Pidcock. You have last year Pidcock runner-up at the World Championships. Wout van Aert was in the wheel of Pidcock, or at least close to Pidcock when he punctured, and in the final stages of that World Championship. In this race in Tabor, who would you put ahead? Pidcock or Van Aert, and why?
Very hard to say. It's also a little bit how Van Aert is going to cope with his first race. Is he going to be able to manage to get through in that race pretty well? Does that race already harm him a little bit for this race? For Pidcock it's a little bit easier. He has only one race this weekend, while a lot of others don't have that luxury. So at this point it's very hard to say, but I tend to say that Pidcock might have the edge on Van Aert in the first meeting they will have against each other.
Indeed, I think Van Aert's proven himself on the road to really make that step up, riding the Tour again in a really strong performance. And I think, though, the Kortrijk may be a really nice preparation race for Tabor, Kortrijk, the fast urban course, like you discussed yesterday, could be really good to get the speed in the legs and kind of just get that one race under his belt before Pidcock comes into Tabor, which will be for Pidcock coming into Tabor with no racing in his legs in the last few months. It's a tough course, Tabor, physically challenging, and maybe he might be a bit slower for Mark. We'll see, but it could really be interesting how it plays out.
Don't forget, Pidcock also has a better starting place due to the UCI rankings than Van Aert has, so that could also benefit him. But then let's take a wider look at the field. We already mentioned a few names. Who would you guys then put down as the main favorite on this fast parcours in Tabor? Which, I mean, fast doesn't equal easy. It's still a tough course, but I mean, if we're talking about someone who doesn't like fast parcourses, you could have in the women's category Vorst, who doesn't seem to like the ultra fast parcourses, and in the men's race, we already said it, most of them do like all types of parcourses at this stage because they are in a good form. But would you guys reckon Van Toornout or maybe Zweek?
I think it could be interesting, but Isabit's already come out and said he's going for the win, and of course they'll all want to be going for the win, the Paul Solzen riders, but I think this could be Isabit's race this weekend.
It will be interesting to see how Isabit's going to bounce back because, in my opinion, he was in the beginning of the season, he was a little bit the leader of Paul Solzen. But the last few races, it has been actually his teammates that have been in the spotlights, and you know it's going to be interesting to see how he's going to cope with that because I honestly think that Van Toornout and Zweek at this moment have a better shape. I mean, Zweek disappointed a little bit last race at the end of it, but Van Toornout is normally a guy that would suit Tabor, but Iserbyt is also very strong, so it's going to be pretty tight between those two, and maybe Zweek can join the party with Toon.
Some other names that I would put up that would have a shot on this parcours are Quinten Hermans and Lars van der Haar. He finds a parcours that really suits him here. And then, of course, the names of Pidcock and Van Aert, who should be able to be in the battle here, so it should be up for an open battle. Brooke Watts yesterday after the podcast told us that his pick here would be Van Toornout because he thinks Van Toornout has the momentum, and mentally that win in Merckxbas really helped him. So maybe that mental push he needs to become a frequent race winner, also of big races. I think he has a point, but I think Michael will definitely be in the battle, but I think we will have a quite open race, at least for the first half, and then maybe in the second half, the likes of Zweek, Van Toornout, Aerts, Iserbyt will then break loose again. But that's just my thoughts. I don't know if you see anything else or see it go down to a sprint maybe even.
We have to remember that the uphill barriers in the course in Tabor is one of the really main features of the race, and we've seen year in year out Van Toornout is one of the few, along with Van der Poel of course, who have really shown themselves confident in jumping these barriers. We'll have to see this weekend if how the conditions are and how people are playing out, but I think we can expect that will favour Van Toornout. We've seen Pidcock in previous years make mistakes on these barriers with a few crashes when it was the European champs for under 23, I believe. He had a couple of crashes in that race, and yeah, the barriers are a key feature of the course, and I think it could play into the hands of Van Toornout.
Yeah, I tend to agree on that because I think those barriers you can easily lose 4 or 5 seconds even if you had a bad run there. And for Van Toornout, we know that he's a pretty good jumper, and as well, you know, it suits him that the hilly parcours of Tabor and the hilly profile. So it wouldn't be bad to say that with his momentum, he is he might be actually one of the main favorites, actually the main favorite to win this race. But we don't know how he's going to cope with the pressure because it's the first World Cup, and for the classification, of course, it's also going to be important to be up there.
Judging by this, we expect an open race, but I still have to ask you guys for one name. Who do you guys think is going to take home the victory here?
Like I said earlier, I think Iserbyt's going to be back on top this weekend.
Yeah, then I would go for Michael Van Toornout. It would be very nice to see him after Max Plus use that momentum and get a win. I don't think he has a big chance in. I don't think he has a big chance to win in Kortrijk. So he might just win in Tabor then.
Well, then I'm going to be going with Toon Aerts. I think this will be his time. Redemption time for Toon Aerts. So we have Aerts for myself, Iserbyt for Tom, and Van Toornhout for Issam. Then, of course, there's also another race that we should talk about, and that's the women's race. As you might have heard, we couldn't really come out who would win the men's race, and for the women's race we'll probably not come out either, because every week we talk about it, it's so close at the front. I mean, we could do whatever we want and still be thinking about who is going to win here. Is it going to be Alvarado? Is it going to be Brandt? Is it going to be Worst? Is it going to be Betsema? Is it going to be anybody else who surprises? But, I mean, there's not really a clear favorite here, and at least I expect another open race once again here.
Well, I mean, it depends what's going to happen in the race itself. I think Brandt and Alvarado are definitely having an advantage at such a race, especially Brandt, to be honest. But the way Betsema was riding in Merckx Plus, and especially how she missed that start completely, but still was able to get so close to victory. If she doesn't mess up her start this time in Tabor, also really want to watch out for, because she is not scared of going all out in the first round and try to win it from the first round.
Like you said, really anything can happen in the women's race. I think we'll find it's just another sprint finish would be probably the most realistic prospect again for me. And of course, exciting racing is what we want as cyclocross fans. So I think we can really expect another good battle this Sunday.
It certainly looks to be a park race that would suit somebody like Brandt or Alvarado once again. Again, less Worst. But for Worst, these uphills, they could be an advantage for her, because she does have the power, she just doesn't have the real top speed by the looks of it. And that's not strange, as Brandt is definitely a road rider and has taken that quality into the field. Some other outsiders that I would like to put on for a potential top 5. And actually, as I say that, I have to correct myself, because as we were correcting the pronunciation of some of the Eurosport commentators last week, we got a mail of one of our listeners from Hungary named Atta, and he said that we were actually mispronouncing Casablanca Vas. It isn't Vas, we should pronounce Vash. So, coming to the outsiders, I was going to mention Vash and maybe the likes of Inger van der Heijden, who is making her return. She's also only riding this one race. Katie Compton, maybe, if she has a bit better result compared to last week. And maybe Anna Kay. This parkour should suit her, and she did well in Merckx Plus last week.
Indeed, she's been rising to form, I'd say. And I think these younger and under 23 riders, obviously they have their own competition within the elite race as well. But I think for the first World Cup of the season, the under 23s are going to be really wanting to put in a good performance. And perhaps she's just coming into form at the right time.
Yeah, I think especially for Vash, it's gonna be a race where she could fight again for a top 5 at least. I think for Van der Heijden, it's a little bit harder to say. I mean, she likes faster parkours. That's really where she excels. But I don't know with the injury how much it affected her shape at this point, and if she actually has the mental. She had a lot of disappointments this season so far. So is she going to get over that and try to?
Well, she was injured on her. She had a foot injury. She was out for a couple of weeks as well. The full story still isn't known. What is known is that she isn't riding Kortrijk despite being on the start list. She is going to Tabor, as I just saw on her Instagram story, so it's only Tabor for her. And I think that injury did really cost her, and I think things should be getting better now compared to how things were at the beginning of the season, because that were definitely not the normal Inge van der Heijden performances.
No, definitely not. And that if it goes a little bit against you, then it's really hard to set yourself over that. But yeah, she showed last year that she was really good in those races. So maybe she can get some momentum back after those terrible weeks.
Then, I mean, I don't really think there's a lot of details we can go into about the battle at the front, because we already said it's probably going to be a battle Brandt against Alvarado, and maybe the Betsema or Vorst will be able to pull alongside this week. But then, who do you guys predict here for the win?
Oh, I think it's a difficult one, as usual, to be honest. But I think I'm gonna, should I say, play it safe, but the world champion, Alvarado, I think she's going to put in another solid performance. She's been pretty consistent this year. A couple of crashes on the last few laps of a couple of races recently, but I think she's going to be back on top this weekend.
I would say if she doesn't mess up her start, I would say Denise Betsema. She was actually so strong in Max Plus, impressed me a lot in that race, and I just hope that she doesn't mess up her start, and then I think she will be able to win that race.
Then I'm going to go with Lucinda Brandt, for the obvious reason that she looks to be the strongest one at the moment that remains unchosen. Then the last part of this podcast is going to be dedicated to the youth categories. We aren't going to go into an enormous amount of details in this, but it does deserve a mention. The World Cup in Tabor, it marks also the beginning of the World Cup for under 23 and junior men and junior women, which is a new category. Sad news here is that both Belgium and the Netherlands didn't send a team. Luxembourg withholds their team from going as well. I don't think Germany is sending any youth teams either. At least I don't see any Germans on the youth start list. So that's the bad news here. The good news is that there's finally some racing there. And let's start with the under 23s. In absence of the Dutch and Belgians, are there any names that really stand out here? Or will it be a super open race because the big names are missing?
Yeah, well, I think we've seen the Belgians and the Dutch to be the strongest this season in the elite races so far. On Toon van der Bosch and Niels van der Putten, the two strongest Belgians really. And obviously Ryan Kamp, world and European champion, raced the Euros, but the Dutch aren't sending a team this weekend. So second place in the European champs was Thomas Main, and I guess he's going to be coming in as favourite for this really, I think. Obviously third place Cameron Mason, very unfortunate, broken collarbone after a crash last weekend in Merckxplas, so we send him all our best wishes for a speedy recovery. But I think it leaves Thomas Main as the clear favourite in a race with only 24 riders, so yeah, there's not going to be too big a field in this one.
Yeah, I think to add on that, maybe Loris Roulier. I think he can be, at such a field, he can maybe excel a little bit and be very close to a podium or even a win, and can contend against the Brits. I think also Ben Turner, maybe, you never know how he's shaping up as well. Definitely a guy to watch out for, and also the Swiss with their man can also be up there for top 5 or top 10.
Indeed, Ben Turner, first race last weekend in Merckxplas, coming back after a broken wrist, and he had some troubles in the start, and he was last out of the first corner in a really big field in Merckxplas, but he rode a strong race, catching up throughout, so perhaps this weekend in a much smaller field, he'll be quite high probably on the front line as well, with his high UCI ranking compared to most of the other riders. So with a clear start, he certainly could be up there for podium contention as well.
there definitely still is some talent at that start line, but I think really to place them in the total picture, we would need to wait for the World Cup rounds that are held in Netherlands and Belgium. So then the Dutch and Belgians will participate, and then fingers crossed that there will be that the guys who did well here will be able to do well there as well. As of the men's juniors race, it's really just a guess. There's been barely any racing for these guys. The guys from Czech Republic have had 2 chances to show themselves so far. No Dutch, no Belgians, and then in terms of the people from Great Britain, France, Switzerland, those countries, their national series had been called off. So there's no real way we can pull somebody out here and say this guy is going to be it. I mean, obviously the eyes will be on the Czechish guys. They have had these Toy Cup races and have shown themselves there. But I don't think there's really anything we can say about this race here, because it's just super open, and we can just only hope that the situation will improve, that the juniors will be allowed to race in more countries, so there will be at least a normal preparation for them going towards the World Championships later this year. I know in the Netherlands the current situation is going to be planned that they are trying to get an exception, so the Dutch nationals will also host the juniors categories there, so that will be the deciding race for the World Championships. But I know that not every country has a position that is as good as the situation in the Netherlands, so it might be harder there, but we can just hope for the best. But for the women's junior race, there is more we can conclude, because these girls or women, I mean, they're on the crossover. In Belgium they call them girls, in other countries they would call them women, so please don't take any offense to that, as I've had earlier, but it's really just my best intentions here. But for these, they have been racing against the elites, and I would like to hear you guys' thoughts on, in my opinion, the 3 big favorites, probably 4 big favorites here: Marie Schreiber, Olivia Onesti, Julia Kopecky, and Zoe Barkstead.
Indeed, well, we've seen these junior women racing in the elites, like you've said. It's obviously a huge step up, longer races, much harder races, and each of the people you've mentioned, they've all shown really strong performances, and I think in this category there will be a really big disparity between the riders, and obviously there could be a couple of unknowns who've not had the opportunity to participate in some of these elite races, but I wouldn't be surprised to see those 4 names taking the top 4 spots and quite considerably distancing themselves from the other competition. I think Zoe Barkstead, as a first year junior, she will be really aiming to take the win in this race. She's shown herself on the road and in junior cross race and youth cross races last year. With winning the British Championship, I think she could be certainly the favourite for this for me.
Yeah, I think as well that if you look at these junior races, it's not like the elite races where the pace is set by the elite themselves, and that the juniors just have to follow. They have to make the race themselves, and there is more room for tactical error that can decide a race. So it will definitely be those 4 that you mentioned, Noah, that that will be up there for sure. But we might be in for a surprise at the podiums of both the women juniors and also the other youth categories that we have.
I think it will be something that we'll be keeping an eye on during this weekend, and I think we've had everything for this first round of the Cyclocross World Cup in Tabor. And if you're wondering where to watch this, make sure to check cyclocrosssocial.com. All the information you need is provided there. And if you like this podcast, make sure to either leave it a rating or share it with your cyclocross friends. We would really appreciate that. I would like to thank Tom and Issam for joining me today.
Thank you.
Thank you for hosting.
And then with that said, I hope we'll see exciting races in Tabor, but later today as well in Kortrijk. Then what remains me is telling you guys where you can watch the race and some other information. So if you're wondering where you can watch this race, make sure to check cyclocross.social.com. and the Cyclocross Social podcast, then that will be back with the analysis of Kortrijk tomorrow, and of course of Tabor there will be a podcast as well. So once again, thank you guys for listening. Leave a rating if you enjoyed, share with your cyclocross friends, and I will see you guys next time. Goodbye.